Today we are at Acer Africa and we're having a chat with Glenn du Toit, who is the Country Manager Director at Acer Africa. Glenn, nice to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
Thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
Absolute pleasure.
So, tell us a little bit about Acer Africa.
Well, we're a hardware company based in South Africa. We look after the Sub-Saharan Africa. We go all the way up even into some of the northern territories in terms of that. Our primary business is selling PCs, computers, but we're also very involved in other areas and aspects of the business, particularly with our Acer for Education programs. We do a lot of thought leadership and helping and guiding people and schools and universities in terms of where technology is going, with the long-term goal that they will eventually buy our computers. So in this day and age, it's very difficult to differentiate on the hardware. So what we do is we work with thought leadership and showing people what they can maximize and get out of the computers, and then close the deal there afterwards. That's what we do.
So the model is not direct, you work through a dealer base?
We work through distributors who then supply resellers, and they then look after the end clients, because unlike selling a TV or a hi-fi, it's a single transaction. You sell a TV, people plug it in, they use it. With computers, there's software, there's often security, training material, LMSs, whatever it happens to be that has to go in, and they need to be network compatible. So there is always a match in making sure that they fit. Where I think in the consumer electronics business, you can go more direct because a hi-fi is going to play when you turn the sound up.
Yes. Okay. I saw that you joined Acer right when lockdown happened.
No, I took over as country manager when lockdown happened.
Sorry.
I joined Acer 10 years ago now.
That's right.
And I've been working within the industry now for the last 10 years. But yeah, I took over a leadership role just before COVID happened in a middle management role. And then as COVID hit, I was fortuitous and positioned nicely to take over. A lot of our leadership infrastructure sits in Europe. So the opportunity, or should I say the gap, I'm not sure which one it was, the gap that created the opportunity presented itself for somebody to take on the leadership role here in South Africa. And I took over as general manager and I ran it reporting into the Dubai office. And then towards the end of 2022, I took over as country manager, where we became our own standalone business unit.
Okay. Sorry, I misread the information.
No, all good. That's fine.
There's a lot of information I had to go through there. So about Acer, can you tell me, do you do any manufacturing here in South Africa, or is it full import? Or
so majority of our business is actually imported PCs. However, we have embarked quite extensively on seeing local manufacturing opportunities. So one of the key projects that we launched, we started working on it as long as 2 years ago, because for a brand like Acer, quality control is very important, ensuring that the local factories can manufacture and do that. And then of course, all the compliance in terms of tax compliance, making sure the bank accounts are set up correctly, making sure all of those transfer pricing. Those who do supply chain management will know about all of these international finance models and things like that. We had to put all of that in place, and then we went into manufacturing, which officially launched in October, November last year. And it's been an interesting one, to say the least. A lot of learnings, how shipping rates increase over the festive period and the impact that they can have on your product, and how to make sure that you cost correctly and that. So it's not for the faint-hearted. You need to know what you're doing. And that's what separates us. We've been able to get over that line. And I can thank some of the experience that I've had in my previous jobs to be able to take us over there. And I think the biggest one was convincing a brand like Acer to trust that we, at a local level, had the capacity, not only financial and from a manufacturing point of view, but we also had the competencies to be able to deliver a product. And we've been very, very successful in that area. And we're looking forward to next year, where it's going to be even bigger.
Yes. I see a lot of traces of sales in your background. Is it something you're passionate about?
No, I hate sales. I don't like the pressure of sales at all.
You're talking about the targets.
No, it's not only that. You know, I once was told by a buyer many years ago when I worked for Sony that I was the salesperson that would speak them into a deal and then speak them out and tell them why the competitor product was better. I think when you love the technology game and you love where technology is going, you do find it very, very easy to look at other people's products. You know, we as Acer, we often find ourselves as leaders in an area, but just as often as we're leaders, we're followers. And sometimes you're going to be ahead, sometimes you're going to be behind. And I think it's important that you acknowledge that there. So the sales side of things is not necessarily my passion. What is my passion is watching the momentum grow in a sustainable manner. And I think that that's the difference between short-term view of business and your ability to, as I always tell it to my team, we need to be able to see around the corner. What is going to happen and how do we gear to protect ourselves from that? And sometimes I suppose it means that you've actually got to walk away from a sale on a short-term basis because it doesn't have the long-term benefit. Salespeople don't do that. They close now and they, ABC of saying, always be closing. But I think when you move into an environment, or if you're my type of personality, you're okay to play the waiting game if you know that there's a bigger carrot down the line. And I think that that's something that in life, especially in this world of digital, we want this instant gratification. We want instantaneous results. As leaders are under pressure. We're under pressure to give results now. And I think that that's the nature of the business and the world we are. And I think that you have to, as a leader, have the grit to turn around and say, I'm not going to take that short-term gain. I'm going to wait it out because there's something bigger coming, because we have positioned for something bigger. If we take the short term, yes, we'll have the immediate gratification, but we won't be able to see the long-term benefit. And I think that that's where we need to start realizing that the world has evolved. And it's tough because there are pressures globally and locally from management who want results, and they want results today.
Absolutely.
And that's the difference between being strategic in your approach and knowing where you want to go, rather than being tactical and impulsive, I suppose.
Yes. Can you give me an example of some of the projects that you do on school or university level as Acer?
Yes, so I think to this actually, if I may go back, and this happened out of COVID, is that I had recently taken over as general manager, and we were literally sitting with time on our hands because you weren't going and traveling to see people. And when you're not out on the road seeing people, you literally are saving 3, 4, 5 hours a day just on traveling alone. And we found that we had some time, and I put the challenge out to the teams, and I said, well, let's see if we can make a difference. And one of the projects that we picked up there was in the esports arena. We had one of the big school groups who was trying to get esports off the ground because now everybody was home and they wanted to get esports. And we had the knowledge and the skills to be able to say, you're kind of going about this the wrong way. Let us help you. We got involved there. That was one big project. And I'm pleased to say that 3 years later, we now are involved in running the biggest esports league, arguably in the Southern Hemisphere, debatably in the world in terms of how we've done it. Let me just quantify that. And that is the fact that most esports are run on tournament basis. Everybody gets together and plays 24 hours, maybe over a weekend. Ours tournament runs over 8 months. We've got over 158 schools that are involved, over 6,000 participants, 1,000 teams, and they run for 8 months, all the way from grade 4 up to matric learners that participate. So as a collective competition, it's pretty big. And we've looked around to see other schools and other universities, and most of them don't run those. They run short-term tournaments and scrims, as they call it. The other side of it as well, in terms of building and that in education, is I found myself coming out of COVID where we were asked to come and present to schools around technology. During COVID, what happened with most of the schools and universities is that they basically told their learners and their parents as they went into lockdown, we're not prepared for this, just go and get online. Whether it was cell phone, tablets, MacBooks, PCs, Chromebooks, it didn't matter, just go online. And as a result of that, as we came out of COVID, schools started realizing that they needed technology to empower education, but they didn't quite know what to do, where to go to. And we put our hands up as Acer, and we started getting very involved in the industry, saying, hey guys, this is the process, this is how you go about it. And that's evolved where now, with the explosion of AI in the last year and a bit, we're actively working not only in South Africa, but within Africa to help guide education departments, educators, as to where the technology is going to, first of all, where it's come from and why it's accelerated so quickly, and then where it's going to and how to prepare to manage it. So we don't get involved in the classroom. I'm not an educator. We stay out of the classroom, but we certainly are there to help people navigate this technology journey. And that takes up a lot of our education time, probably talking once, sometimes even as many as 3, 4 times a month to a collective, whether it's a class of 30 learners in some instances in high school when we're doing job portfolio, but also in the collective of, up to 500, 600 schools at a time where we're talking to the educators and the principals. As I said, this morning I was on a call with the Zimbabwe guys, just working with them through some of the challenges that they're having. And access and security is a big, big issue that schools need to look at. So working with them on that.
And is it a personal passion as well? Because
Very
I
much
see
so.
you volunteer in that space too.
Yeah, I spend a lot of my free time doing it. So outside of where Acer is called in, you have to be flexible. Educators have this, they start at 7 in the morning and they go until 4. And during that time, they're dedicated to the kids. So you have to accommodate them before or after. So often it's evenings or morning sessions.
Yes, I noticed that very much so. So at Acer, looking at the last couple of years and how the work environment has changed, do you have a flexible environment in terms of people working from home, people working at the office, where it's possible?
Yeah, we actually have quite a flexible environment. So what we do from our side is we are task-based. So we give people a role to play and a job to do, and they need to make sure that they deliver on it. Where they deliver is geography. Whether it's at home or at the office, we don't really police people. There are laws in South Africa where we've got to keep controls as to people's working hours. So that gets done through keystrokes and things like that. But quite frankly, it's not from a management point of view. We're more looking at teaching people to behave in a specific way. And that is a behavior of delivery over a behavior of time. And we work that way with them. And it works quite well for us. In fact, what we do find is that with this methodology, we have a higher level of attendance than we had before. So what happens is we create this collective environment. We came out of COVID, and in our COVID time, I think it was sort of the beginning of May 2021, where the ban was lifted in South Africa, and we then made it available, and we said to everybody, we're going to make the office of it. We changed the way our office was designed. Come back if you feel comfortable, and we had everybody come back, which proposed the problem because we had to have restrictions on. So we then came up with a bit of a schedule. But one of the dynamics that we had was the office floor became the safe zone. In other words, if you were going to have a Teams or Meet call, you had to go into one of the call rooms or the boardrooms. You weren't allowed to have it on the floor because the floor was now a safe zone, so you could be noisy. And we created an environment there which just naturally took its course. And it was the most fascinating environment, because I would sit in my office and you could almost set your watch that every hour and a half, you would have this raucous noise and music coming from down the passage. And then as true as can be, 15 minutes later, it would go dead quiet again and everybody would go back to work. And I think there's a lesson in that, is that if you empower people to look after themselves, whilst managing people is part and part of checking that they're achieving their goals and their tasks that are set out, they don't need to be micromanaged. And I'm fortunate that I've got a team around me, and we've curated a team, and we've coached the team, and we've worked with the team and mentored the team to get to a stage where they are accountable and sustainable in their own way. It doesn't come without its own challenges. You know, every now and then you do have to phone somebody and go, listen, I haven't seen you in the office for a week, where are you? And then you check their records and their performance, and generally you'll be able to pick up whether they're actually performing or not. So micromanagement is a thing of the past. It was there when people wanted to get a golden watch at 20 years. Those days are gone.
Nobody has time for that.
Ironically.
Yes, absolutely. So with all this in mind, tell me a little bit about skills development at Acer for your own staff.
We have 2 programs that we work on. One of the key programs is obviously skills within the sector that they're playing in, or in the roles that they're playing in. And generally what we find is that when we do the individual development plans, which are generally done quite informally, it's done over a cup of coffee, it's there. We don't have an HR department in Acer in Africa. So HR is run by the line managers, and they're responsible to lead their teams. So individual development programs are done through a discussion, a cup of coffee with the line manager, and that filters in terms of where the individual wants to go. And they are responsible as line manager to create the engagement. And when we see the engagement dropping or people's tone drop, we tend to then circle the wagons, have a bit of a conversation. Maybe we go and we sit around a fire, literally, and have a conversation and find out where everybody's at. So it does require that if you don't have an HR department and you're running it, that you need to know exactly where your people are at, etc. And part and parcel of that is identifying where the shortfalls are. So whilst you might have an individual within the marketing department and they're great at marketing, they may have a skill shortfall in project management. So they're great at being creative, but they're just not hitting deadlines. we don't manage the deadlines. What we do is we train them on project management to teach them how to deal with multitasking and tasks and deadlines and that. So we run that program. And then the second program, which is a little bit closer to heart, is development of individuals who are coming through the mix. So for example, we have a lot of interns. Okay. And we also do a lot of women development. And we see that particularly in the IT sector, there's a big hole within female, particularly gender-based. I wouldn't say it's discrimination. I think it's more a case of women not getting the first shot at the goals, and then they just don't get the opportunity. So it's about creating opportunities. But what we do is we help them develop their voice. When I say we, it sounds so condescending for me. No, what we do is we encourage them to take courses that they would like to go on that help them there. We get behind those courses that are specifically non-work aligned, that we work within it. So it's empowerment and things like that. Okay. But I think that it's the development side of things, which is often not necessarily the role related. But then, of course, there's the specific role related shortfalls and the opportunities that we then focus on. Yes. And that's really how we grow people within the organization.
So that's quite an interesting concept. I can totally see the line manager knowing their staff much more intimately than an HR department would, but it's still challenging because they have their daily work. So do you provide them with tools? And there's obviously some sort of a backbone for individuals to know career progression. So there must be a lot of tools behind it, right?
Actually, no. And we're a very small team. And when I say they're a small team, we have the corporate tools. Okay. That push through. And we have the corporate goal setting, where we sit at the beginning of the year and we set goals for everybody, and they're smart goals, etc., etc. While they're all great from a theoretical HR environment, I think over time they've become a bit of a tick box exercise. I know. And what we do is we have a culture of managing the behavior. I mentioned it before, where we know that if our team that is out there driving brand adoption, if they behave in a certain way, if they go to their meetings, if they fill in this form, if they complete their core reports, if they have a marketing plan, if they do their sellout planning, all of those things, if they do the disciplines, the numbers will come. And that's the beauty of behavioral management over task management. So it's one of the things that I learned very, very earlier, pretty much because I didn't like being micromanaged, was that if I could manage people's behavior, it's there. And I get ostracized in the office by the team often because they know when I'm walking around, I'm not just walking around to say hi to everybody, I'm actually observing behavior. And we encourage the guys who come through our leadership program, or the ladies who come through the leadership program, to be observant. So we have a very, very strong focus on the culture within the Acer Africa team. And that culture is not a single dimension culture, it is a contributing culture. We don't want people who come and fit in with the culture. We want people who come in and contribute to the culture. And it's a big difference, because otherwise you end up with incestuous people in the organization, and you don't want that. You want conflict. You want people to stand up. So we create an environment where people can have meetings in the hallway. We can have the conversations. There's always learning. There's whiteboards all over this place. We write on walls in this place. We write on desks, just so that we can say to people, that we can encourage people to, at that specific point in time, are you getting your message across clearly? And don't block the idea because you think it's not the right time. The manager or the line manager or the leader, whoever is in the organization, will correct you if they say we'll get to that later. But it underpins with an implicit alignment within the management team or in the leadership team, because it doesn't help us to have a culture where I'm leading in this way and I have a strong manager who wants to task manage. And we've seen that. We've had people like that. And quite frankly, what happens is that they kind of say, this is not for me, and they leave. They're quite, with respectfully, if I may say so, they're quite vocal about the fact that they don't like the way we work, and we're not driving the drum of we want this and this and this. And sometimes we have pressure where our guys are driving the drum. But within our office and how we work, in order to get things done, we firmly believe in empowerment and making sure people take responsibility. And that requires people's ability to be creative and really throw the box out. Wow.
So in terms of recruitment then, what are you looking for when you recruit people?
Number one, the willingness to learn.
Okay.
It's quite an interesting one, because you want people who are confident and decision makers and decisive by its very nature. But I think that there's an element of humility that comes through when you turn around and say, whilst I have a very strong opinion on this matter, or I believe in this, and I believe that this is the direction, I am open to go and learn and check that I am right.
Yeah.
So my kids, one of the things that I always, we drummed into them is the smartest person in the room knows that they don't know everything.
Yeah.
And if that is the philosophy that you can have in your life, no matter what your results are, you can have straight A's, you can get 100%. But the reality is there's a very big difference between book smart and life smart.
Very true.
And whilst book smart and having academic around you is important, the life skills that come with it. And I think that when we're hiring people, what we're actively looking for is people who are open to learn, people who are curious, and people who are critical thinkers.
Yes.
A critical thinker is not somebody who interrogates only your ideas. Those are the easy ones. A critical thinker is somebody who interrogates their own ideas. And that is a skill that we look for actively.
So, tell us a little bit about how did you get into this industry? How did your career come about?
Into this industry?
Most people don't end up where they start, right?
Absolutely. So into this industry, I was retrenched twice and I found a job at Acer. Actually, that is very, very true. So it was quite an interesting story. I grew up in the consumer electronics business. I had the luxury of working for brands like Sony, Sansui. I launched a brand which was worked with the launch of a brand called Futronic, which was part of the Panasonic business back in the day. I then, for my sins, spent 7 years in retail, learning how to be a buyer and buying manager, which, whilst it wasn't my greatest 7-year stint, I certainly did learn a lot about supply chain management and stock management, day stock. It's something that vendors don't understand, is how day stock works, the formula. And that learning within that retail sector got me very, very close, not only to the supply chain and understanding how that business works, but more importantly, gave me an appreciation for end user. So one of my tenures was at the old Ellerines Group, and my job there, my role there was I was merchandiser for sound and vision, hi-fis and TVs. And we used to have to go and do our buying for Ellerines on the one end and Furniture City and Appliance City on the other end, which is a complete demographic split, a complete financial LSM change in terms of where everybody was at. So we would talk about having to go into one meeting, take your brain out and put a new brain in to buy for a different one, because they were so different. And that is how I learned not about the system, because the system was standardized across them, but how individual customers behaved. And that gave me a passion for behavioral sciences, how people think. If I did this, how it would work. I use an example. We did a promo once where we tried to give away a DSTV decoder. It was a failure. It didn't work. Buy this and get a free DSTV decoder. Didn't work. That same customer base, we said, buy this TV and pay only R19.99 for the DSTV decoder, and suddenly sales went through the ceiling. I couldn't understand it, but it worked. But it made me fascinated with behavioral sciences. Then there were the changes. Ellerines unfortunately didn't make it, and I moved out and I went and started working again for Sony, and we got involved there again. And after that sort of stint working in Sony and that, I then moved over to Acer. And that's how I got into the industry. Great. But when I got into the industry at Acer, I realized that whilst I had relied on my personality and my big mouth and a lot of ego and abrasiveness to get to that position, and I did well. I was able to sustain a good life there, and I was blessed all along the way. I needed to go back and study.
Yes.
And as I started studying, I started unpacking more and more, particularly around the behavioral sciences. And I went and I studied overseas. I did a lot of studying from overseas. In fact, all my qualifications are from overseas, because they were in the very, very new industries of information architecture, strategic leadership and sciences, particularly in the digital game. And then, of course, moving on to leadership in a higher level as well. And that is how I got to where I am, is that you can have all the charisma and bravado, et cetera, but it doesn't matter who you are, that ceiling will hit you unless you have learnt from an academic perspective why and how the cake is baked.
Yes.
It's great to be a baker who can whip something off, but if you want to expand your repertoire, you need to go and you need to make sure that you've got some formalized way of actually studying it. And it's become a bit of a thing over the last couple of years where people believe, oh, I don't need a degree, I can do this on skill.
It has, yeah.
Yeah, you can get in with that and you can get to a certain point, but then you get into what I refer to as a cul-de-sac, career cul-de-sac, where you can't go any further, not only from a career perspective, but you actually can't contribute to the company anymore because you have no new knowledge. So the always learning philosophy, which we from a people management push down, you got to live it yourself. So even now, I'm busy doing courses on life coaching and how to be mentors and things like that as well, because if I'm not going to be better, how do I encourage my team to be better?
Yes.
And that philosophy of being better today than I was yesterday lives with me as much as it lives with everybody else around us. And that's how I got to where I am.
So that's great advice. If you, to managers, I would say, because that is something that most of us look at the individuals, but what about managers? If you have to give one piece of good advice to a manager today, what would that be?
You don't know everything. And I think that that is such an important part because we have a generation that is feeding into our job market at the moment. And this generation doesn't only come with cookie ideas that are off the wall and off the reservation. In many instances, they come with ideas that can teach us as managers how to be open about things. Managers tend to be in their position, and I'm referring specifically to managers. Managers manage tasks, leaders lead people. And managers who manage tasks generally come from an environment where there's a systematic linear approach to this needs to be done before this, or we need to do all of this. It becomes very, very scary as managers to let go a little bit of the reins and turn around and say, I don't know everything. So I want to know a little bit more of what you have to teach me. And whilst the ego sometimes comes into play, as a manager, you need to be able to step out. I think one of the biggest difference between leaders and managers is leaders are open to learn. Managers are about what the task can be. And I'm not being condescending to managers. I think they're very important. You can't be a leader without having been a manager. You can't get there without having learned your tasks and what needs to be done. And then you start letting go. And then what happens is that you grow with your team instead of controlling your team. So if you're asking me about managers, it would be open-mindedness and be ready to hear ideas, because some of the best ideas come from your team. And then I think the caveat to that is don't take their ideas as your own. Give them the credit where credit is due, because them feeling that they have contributed to your career is part of their development as much as it's part of yours.
Absolutely correct. Last one, what advice do you have for young people who are just starting out? We all know that jobs are very scarce. So what is it that you feel individuals can do to make themselves stand out to get that job?
I'm almost going to kind of go to the same thing, because the same thing I said about managers.
Yes.
And that is the approach of always learning. I think whilst that might come across in an academic manner, let me tell you a bit of a story of one of the interns we had here. And he's become a really close friend of mine now because he's working through. And he was starting out, we brought him in as an intern, and he was doing a specific task. And the opportunity came up for him to do a different task, something that required him to be away from home a little bit more. And it required him to be more flexible in terms of his learning. He would need to move from just doing small stuff and tasks around the office in the promotions area to actively engaging with customers, which was out of his comfort zone. And he kind of came back to me and he said, I don't know if I want this. I don't know if I need this. You know, I've got this and I've got this and this. And I said to him, you're making a mistake, because if you have a learning mindset, it's not only about the academics and that, it's about learning things that make you uncomfortable. And I would encourage anybody to get uncomfortable, to learn the stuff that they're not comfortable with. Whether that's learning how to talk to people, whether it's learning how to present in front of people, whether it's learning how to write letters, whether it's learning how to use artificial intelligence. Get out of your comfort zone. Nobody wants to hire you only for what you know. They want to hire you for what you're capable of learning. So you have to be open to those learnings. In exactly the same way that a manager and a leader has to be open. The formula doesn't change because of your level. I have this philosophy that says that we're all on the journey together. The only difference between me as a country manager and the person who is the very, very junior staff is the complexities of these tasks. We all have the same tasks to do. It's just the complexities and the responsibilities that change as you move up. So I think that the big lesson for anybody is nothing is a wasted learning. There is no such thing as wasted
100%.
learning. So my encouragement to them is learn as much as you can. be better today than you were yesterday, which means you've got to challenge who you are today so that tomorrow you can be better.
Yes.
And you've got to continuously challenge and always be learning. Always be learning, whether it's from the person on the side of the street in terms of how it is, or alternatively, whether it's from a book or from an online course. We need to develop a learning mindset, particularly here in Africa. We cannot allow ourselves to be put into a mold that says we know it all, we've got it all, because that certainly isn't the case. We need to always be learning.
100%. Glenn, thank you so much for your time today. I hope our readers get as much info out of this discussion as I did. Certainly a very different way of looking at things. It's not the run-of-the-mill, but I think it's so applicable and so practical that one can apply it. So thank you very much, Glenn.
Well, absolute pleasure, and good luck to you, and good luck to all the guys who are out there in these really trying times in terms of finding work and that. Don't give up. And if you can't get a job in corporate, go and start your own business. We live in the land of milk and honey. There's so many opportunities out there. You just need to be open to find it, to roll up your sleeves and get stuck in.
100%. Totally agree. Thank you,
Thank
Glenn.
you.
And that concludes our chat with Glenn de Toit, who is the Country Manager and Director at Acer Africa. And we hope you get as much value out of this video as I did today. Very insightful information. Thank you. Goodbye.